I'm Danielle Metz,
I'm Robert Vaughn.
and this is the Danielle Metz Show. Quote, my son, who's 13 years old, started watching Ben Shapiro videos, and he's like the gateway drug to the next group, and then goes right to Jordan Peterson, and then it goes down, and in 3 clicks he was in neo-Nazi stuff. It was astonishing, and I had to listen to it at dinner, and I was sort of like, I'm going to kill Susan Wojcicki first. Kara Swisher, founder of Recode, a technology news website, told Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, at the Lesbians Who Tech conference earlier this month. And when the CEO of YouTube, brushing the hilarious death threat aside, asked if she was suggesting that they should remove Ben Shapiro from the platform, Kara Swisher replied, I would, but I can't. I found it interesting that Kara mentioned Jordan Peterson in her not-so-subtle call for censorship. Dr. Peterson has recently had his fellowship at Cambridge rescinded and his book 12 Rules for Life, one of the best-selling nonfiction books of all time, removed from the shelves of one of the biggest booksellers in New Zealand in the wake of the Christchurch shootings. The white supremacists will just have to console themselves with Mein Kampf, which is, of course, still readily available. So the left seems to think that they can save the world by banning all the things, or at least all the things they don't like. And do you think it's possible, Robert? Are we going to ban our way into Utopia?
Oxymoronic, isn't it? No, of course not. And as a matter of fact, as pointed out on a call-in show the other day about the New Zealand shooting video being banned from certain social media platforms, that only sends it underground, and what's underground now becomes forbidden fruit, and people actively seek it out. Mm-hmm. Where if Facebook, for example, didn't ban over 1.5 million views of that thing. No, I don't mean views, but people sharing it. 1.5 million shares. So 1.5 million people out there on this social media site alone, Facebook, thought better than the trust and safety people at Facebook that this is worth sharing for whatever reason. Bill Whittle had his reasons, Matt Christensen had his reasons for looking at it, I had my reasons for looking at it, which I did.
And I have my reasons for not looking at it.
Exactly, and that's exactly how it should be. The individual makes choices, not government, not overseers. But mind you, if Facebook wants to be a family-friendly place, I can see where posting videos of death, they can do that, and I don't really have an objection to it. It's when the government, like the New Zealand government, comes in and arrests a teenager for sharing it, and he could face many years in prison.
Yeah, I think it's like 10 to 14 years.
Yeah, it's outrageous. That kind of thing is not a utopia. That is a police state. That is definitely not a free country if that's the case.
Well, they say they do it in order to, quote, save people from themselves and each other. But I think what it really means is they want to control things. They don't want to save anything. It's all about control. And it's all the things that they don't like. The things they do like, oh, that's perfectly fine. Like the fact that Mein Kampf is still available. But 12 Rules for Life? Like, straighten your shoulders and clean up your room. That's incitement to violence, apparently.
Oh, one of the other books that is easily available out there is Saeed Qutb's Milestones, which is a blueprint for jihadists to wage war on non-believers. That's readily available on Amazon and most bookstores, and certainly online.
Yeah, but that's part of the protected class. So
again, the protected class. We saw it with the Montreal stabbing of the priest, Grew, when that person came up from the pews and stabbed the priest. That was easily shown on the social media and on
regular news outlets.
Regular news outlets. That's how I saw it on CTV. No problem there. So what's the difference? Here you have an act of, it's obvious terrorism, of a priest in a church. Now, mind you, I mean, there's a difference in degree here between that and a New Zealand shooting. Miles of degrees. He was not killed, and he survived, but the principle is the same. It was an act of attempted murder, in my belief. It was in a house of worship, but it was against a Catholic versus against Muslims. And this, we find, is the defining characteristic all the time when it comes to banning things and censorship. You have to be part of that protected class of Muslims. And then you're okay to have your deaths expunged from history. But when it comes to Christians or non-Muslims, no, it's fair game to show them jumping out of buildings on 9/11 or the piles of bodies in the gas chambers of Auschwitz, or just the horrors of war in Vietnam and the Second World War, when video was readily available and you could see people going over the top. Even in World War I, you saw people going over the ridge at Vimy, being shot down, dead right there. I mean, do we take that off do we ban that? Do we take that off the platforms? I say no. You let it up to the person to decide.
Well, I think it's important to have that kind of stuff available too, because you mentioned both Matt Christensen and Bill Whittle. They both wanted to watch it because they wanted to know what to expect if they ever found themselves in a situation like that, and how to prepare yourself mentally. It's that situational awareness and knowing what to expect from it's thankfully very, very, very rare kind of circumstance, but you kind of do want to know what to expect in order to mentally prepare and emotionally prepare yourself for it.
Yes, but having watched it myself, I could tell you right now there was nothing those guys could have done. Unless they were armed. Unless they were all armed with handguns, and powerful handguns too, if the guy
But that's
wore
what
body
New
armor.
Zealand did. They solved that problem. They banned all the scary guns now, and all the New Zealanders that have the right to carry at the moment have to turn in all their guns.
Well,
That'll
all the
fix it. That'll solve the
semi-automatics.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
certain
all the
guns.
ones the assault rifles is what they call them. And
There's no such
in New
thing, by the
Zealand,
way.
yeah, I know. And in New Zealand, you're not even allowed to own a gun if you're going to use it for self-defense. That's one of the disqualifiers. And I find that absurd. But a lot of people have guns there. Their murder rate is minuscule. But because of this one incident, they have to turn them all in. Because that'll fix the problem. Banning things fixes the problem.
It's not just having guns either, because there's a lot of Americans who have the right to open carry and concealed carry, and yet you see a lot of violence down there where people don't react quick enough. And that's the thing. It's almost like a car accident. And I've been in car accidents. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this have been too. They know that all of a sudden, boom, it's there. There's nothing you could do, if it's not your fault, that is, to prepare for it. And if you don't see it coming, there's nothing you can do about it. It's boom, it's done. Just like somebody pulls a gun on you, man, and boom, 1 second, you're done.
Yeah, but there's a difference between situational awareness, like you said, driving is if you're aware of what other people are going to do, the light turns green, you don't go through right away. You look both ways, make sure everybody's coming to a stop. There are ways you can defend yourself driving, or again, situational awareness. If somebody looks like they're going to do something, or you see them go to grab a gun, well, this guy walked in with a gun, so he was fairly obvious. But I don't know. I think there's more hope that you can do something than just blindly hoping it doesn't happen to you.
Oh, sure, there's preventative measures you can take, yes. And
Never
and
leave your
measures-
house.
And measures that you can take to make sure that whoever does perpetrate such a crime doesn't get away without, for example, videos. You know, having videos of it, things like that. Like the video that was streamed of the stabber in Montreal. You know, people can understand. Actually, that was interesting to watch, because now you saw those people in the church rush toward the stabber and to protect the priest, not running away. Now, mind you, maybe that's because there was no gunshot involved. There was a stabbing. And they could probably, within an instant, figure out that they could do something.
Yeah.
But if there's like with the New Zealand shooter, as soon as those gunshots went off, people just started to run and to hide and to cower in the corners, which is, I guess, human nature, because that's exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
But banning it? No.
Yeah.
No government should ban it. Whether or not a site wants to put it up, like I wouldn't put it up on Just Right Media's site or show it on this show. There's no need for it. If you want to go see it, you can find it.
We're a publisher, not a platform, right? So
Yeah. So so a government doing that should be stopped. New Zealand government is actually, if you read the manifesto of Brenton Tarrant, this is exactly what he wanted to happen, was a dipolarization or polarization of the left and right, an outright banning of weapons, so that the right side, so-called, would come up and fight the left side, and he was looking for a civil war. And the left are just feeding right into that prediction.
It's almost like he handed them a script and they went, okay, yeah, we got that. Okay, check mark, check mark, check mark. Okay, we covered all the bases. Everything he wanted, we've just handed to him.
Yep, and that sociopath was absolutely right when he predicted what will happen, and it has been happening, and the left have been
complicit
in carrying out his manifesto. Even to the point where, I mean, he calls himself a leftist, he calls himself a fascist, he calls himself an eco-fascist, loves communism. And the right come out and lie about that and say he's a Trump supporter and a right-winger and an alt-right, and people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson are to blame. It's right out of his manifesto.
Don't forget PewDiePie. It's all his fault. And
and PewDiePie. Who could hate
PewDiePie.
PewDiePie? But no, banning actually feeds this. It feeds into it. It is actually predictable, and it is a characteristic of statists and collectivists, and it has no right in no place in a free society, banning anything.
And all it does is make the thing that you're banning that much more desirable.
Yeah, I bet you there's a lot of people in the States who love to get their hand on a Kinder Surprise. Crossing the border, come over and get your Kinder Surprise toys.
That to me is one of the most bizarre things, and the fact that it is so widely known and mocked, the fact that they haven't rescinded that stupidity, just, I don't understand. It just blows my mind. It's a toy and a chocolate egg because they think their citizens are too stupid to not know that they shouldn't eat the toy inside the chocolate egg.
Yeah, imagine all the dead Canadian children from Kinder Surprises or Italian children.
The horror.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But those Americans are protected by Big Brother or Big Mama, however you want to describe it.
We hold vigils every year at Easter for the children who died from the eggs.
But that's how absurd some of this can be. Banning, for example, in Canada, it's against the law to have crime comic books. And it's been decided, for example, from experts that almost every comic book that you could find these days from crime fighters like the Batman and the Superman and all those, Spider-Man, are depicting crimes so that they can be fought, and that is against the law in Canada. Mind you, it's not been acted on and enforced, except back in the 80s. I think there was an enforcement of it, but that's a long time ago.
Let me guess, that would have been probably a specific issue of something, rather than broadly across the board.
Yes, it would have been specific, but I couldn't find out what it exactly was. It may have been Mark Emery for all I know. But point is, though, that if you have a law like that on the books, it acts as a wedge, a way for a cop or the police or the state or the government to come in and harass somebody, intimidate somebody who is an otherwise peaceful person. In other words, we can't get this comic book store owner on these kinds of charges, but he's selling a crime novel. Let's go in and bust him. And actually, I think that it was at least 3 years in prison. I think was probably the you double check on that, the penalty for selling crime comics. And it's almost like how they got the gangsters in Chicago.
Yeah, taxation.
Tax laws.
Al Capone.
Yeah, or sometimes sending things through the mail, like that woman Elizabeth Holmes. They didn't get her on a lot of other things, but mail fraud. She sent fraudulent test results through the mail. That's wire fraud. Oh my God, now she can spend 20 years in jail. These kinds of silly, unnecessary bannings and stupid laws serve a purpose for a corrupt and collectivist state, not a free country.
Well, you pass enough laws and you make everybody a criminal, and then you can just enforce the laws as you see fit.
It's almost impossible to go outside your door without being running afoul of some law here or there.
I'm pretty sure even being indoors, you're running afoul of some law.
We're probably doing it right now.
Well, you can't be drunk within 2 hours of driving in your own home.
Well, apparently you can, but it's up to you to prove that you weren't
exactly.
driving.
But proving a negative is never possible. So that's just, they got you. Yep. And who are they going to believe, the cop or you? So it's getting back to the banning though. I just find that the more they ban, the more they, like you said, divide wedges between us, and the more they silence free speech. And I think that's the biggest arbiter of this is the fact that they want to control free speech because free speech speaks the truth, and the truth does not sit on their side.
Yes, I can only think of that as being, well, there's probably two reasons to ban things if you were a statist. One is obviously what you said before, it's control, and you're exercising control. If you're a hammer, you look for nails to beat. If you're a legislator, you look for laws to pass and things to ban and people to imprison. That's what you do. That's
why they call them lawmakers. right?
Yes. Yeah. And the other reason is of course, perhaps if it's not simply control, it is to make sure that there is a wedge that you can get somebody on if you can't get them on something else. So I see no reason to ban anything unless it's been demonstrably proven that such a thing is detrimental to everybody. And I can think of maybe a couple examples. I always go back to at least one, which is leaded gasoline. Putting lead in gasoline to make the engine run smoother had some very nasty effects because the lead went into people's plants and that they ate, and it gets compounded biological magnification in the body.
Well, that's property rights, essentially.
That is right. And the other one may have been chlorofluorocarbons, which may or may not have had
Say that
an
3 times
effect
fast.
in the ozone layer, but I should research that one a little more. But if that's the case, if you can demonstrably, scientifically, and conclusively prove that such a thing is causing detriment to everybody, and I'm not talking the climate change nonsense and carbon dioxide nonsense, which is, of course, not demonstrably proven. Yeah, but objectively proven, then maybe, yeah, you can ban it. But other than that, people should be able to own guns, carry guns, watch comic books, and watch anything they want on the internet. And it's a free-for-all out there because that's freedom, choice.
All right, well, I'm free to choose that. This is the end of the episode. Okay. So take care, behave yourself, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers.
If you've enjoyed this presentation, visit justrightmedia.org for more programming that's not right-wing, it's just right.